Hi everyone and welcome to our marketing ROI battle. Today we have two fierce opponents, social ads versus employee advocacy. And before we move to presenting our speakers, I would like to ask everyone who's present to maybe message us in the questions tab where you're tuning in from, just for us to know who is in the audience and to get to know you guys better. And now let's move on to presenting our opponents. So in the advocacy corner, we have Alexander Cardwell from SMARP, the marketing director of SMARP. And in the social ads corner, we have director of global customer experience marketing at Smartly.io, Mark de Bruijn. So Alex, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and why do you feel passionate about employee advocacy?
Yeah, sure thing. So hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I already see some people tuning in from Canada, from England. So we're already getting quite a global audience. But yeah, like Anita said, Alex Cardwell. I'm the marketing director here at SMARP, and I've been working in employee advocacy for around the past 3 years or so. And what makes me really passionate about the topic and about the concept is that, well, first of all, for those of you who don't necessarily know what employee advocacy is, in its simplest form, it is having employees essentially share company-related content with their networks. So it's a great way to kind of have your company materials delivered to a much broader audience. But so from a marketing standpoint, and me being in marketing, obviously that's exciting. It's a new kind of untapped channel, but it's also kind of a win-win because now when you're sharing this company-related content with your networks, not only are your networks becoming more involved with your company and kind of aligning with your company values, it's also at the same time aligning your employees with those company values. So it's kind of a win-win on many axes. It's not just an external marketing channel. It also kind of works on the for internal communications as well. And that's really where SMARP comes into play. Of course, a lot of you here know SMARP, given that you're joining our session, but we are a employee communications platform that enables advocacy as well. But yeah, really happy to be here.
Thank you, Alex. And Mark, could you kindly tell us about yourself and why do you want to defend social ads today?
Yeah, of course. And thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Mark, Director of Customer Experience Marketing at Smartly.io. And yeah, at Smartly, we make social advertising easy, effective, and enjoyable. So we basically automate every step of social advertising. Yeah, for me today, I mean, I would love to share why social advertising is such an amazing opportunity for brands. And as always, it's a little bit my personal topic. I would also love to tell more about like the human side of social advertising and the role of personalization and even maybe the role of or the importance of your creatives. So yeah, really looking forward to a good discussion. And I wrote a book a little while ago, this book, Customers Are People Too. And one of the chapters of the book is about the employee experience. So which I think is still very, very much underestimated. So I won't be too hard on you today.
Mark, you should have told me. You should have told me about your book before this. I would have had time to read it and come up with better counter arguments.
But I welcome you to be as hard on Alex as you want to. I want a battle here. Okay, now let's move on to the housekeeping issues. So since it's a battle, we have 5 rounds, and each round will last 10 minutes. I'm going to pose one question, and both speakers will have an opportunity to reply to that. And then we will also, within the same round, pick up the questions from the chat and ask speakers to answer them. Or I also might have my own follow-up questions. And we will, as it says here, we will have live Q&A throughout the session. So feel free to use this question tab. And thank you very much for writing where you're from. Very nice to have such an international audience. And also there is now an emoji function. So if you will see this little smiley face on the bottom of the screen. So feel free to react with emojis. Yes, like that. Thank you.
There they come.
Yes. Okay. So without further ado, let's start our first round. And the first question will be for Mark. So Mark, how do you prove ROI on social ads?
Yeah, I should have bought some gloves for this round, but Yeah, I think the ROI of social advertising can actually be shown very easily. I think with most things in the digital world, but mainly maybe social advertising, because you can track things even to the smallest detail, maybe even to the detail of one ad performance. And it really comes down to how much, well, maybe the basics of ROI, right? How much do you invest in it, and how much really revenue is it creating for you? And that might seem super obvious, but I think for many brands, social advertising is their main channel for generating new business or new revenue. So it's, I think, extremely important that you track and that you can prove your ROI in general, on a high level, because of maybe your higher management, but also maybe the simple things, or I call it simple things, but the smaller things, how you can test things, trying new things, and all of that can also be tracked really easily. And I think in the end, it's really about the revenue that it creates for you, which I think is why so many brands and people see the value of social advertising.
Okay, Alex, what do you have to counter to that?
Well, if we talk about kind of how you prove ROI in an advocacy investment, then, and I think Mark kind of hit the nail on the head there. Of course, the main thing you're looking at is contribution to revenue. So essentially, how much this channel is driving revenue divided by what your investment was, multiplied by 100. You get a nice little percentage, which is your return on investment. With employee advocacy, there are some additional ways that kind of a lot of our clients will use to kind of prove ROI. For example, the platform will give you an estimated earned media value, which is essentially how much you would have had to pay in social advertise or in social ads to get the same amount of exposure on social. So that's one way you can kind of show that you're generating a certain dollar amount. This is all based kind of on average cost per click advertising fees for different networks. But of course, at the end of the day, the amount of revenue the program is driving is always going to be the main thing. And with employee advocacy, the nice thing about employee advocacy is most platforms, ours included, will tag all of yours. So essentially, when an employee shares a piece of content with their social networks, it'll tag it with UTM tags that, of course, most marketers are familiar with, and then can use those tags in marketing automation to kind of track how those contacts, how those leads, how those opportunities are progressing through the pipeline. So anybody that's kind of familiar with evaluating marketing traffic and seeing how it contributes to revenue will instantly know how to kind of prove ROI on an advocacy investment. Okay, thank you. But what would you both say are like the main challenges for employees to communicate the ROI? For example, Alex, in employee advocacy, how do you communicate ROI to the higher management? So I feel like a broken record. I don't want to, but I promise I'll give you something more. But again, like contribution to revenue, senior management is always going to be interested in a dollar amount. Like how much money is this creating? For example, when you're starting an advocacy program on the onset, and we all know from kind of inbound marketing is a kind of long-term game. You know, you get leads in, you nurture them, sales works them, and then they eventually close into revenue. Sometimes if you have a really long sales cycle, it might be tough on the onset to show how it's contributing to revenue, just because it might take 6 to 18 months to close. I've heard some companies, like larger implementations for not for our product, but for a bunch of kind of enterprise grade products, could be up to 3 years. So like, how do you prove ROI when you might, the person that drove that inbound lead might not even be at the company anymore by that at that stage. So in the beginning, something that I was talking about, a way with advocacy, if you're struggling to prove ROI in the beginning, is what I was talking about related to estimated earned media value. So looking at how much would have we had to pay to generate this amount of clicks or this amount of reactions on social media. That's a great way to, in the beginning, understand how much value you're creating. And then once it actually those deals start closing that originated from EA. And by the way, there's research that states that inbounds that come through employee advocacy sources are up to 7 times more likely to convert. The research done by IBM, I think it was. So once those start converting, you can then, of course, really easily showcase to senior management how it's creating value.
Okay, thank you. We have a question here from Jim. Maybe Mark, you could answer. Do you have experience in paid and advocacy programs? How do you approach balance lead attribution in those cases? Have you had experience where you had to balance 2 channels?
Not to be honest, not too many. I think if you think about this will mostly be used probably for maybe in the context of hiring, of course, new people, and in that sense, maybe paid social is used less, I think. But there are some good examples. I mean, I know the city of Amsterdam, the city of Helsinki, for example. I think they do set up pretty sweet campaigns on how to kind of recruit, or maybe recruit is not the right word, but kind of to attract new tech professionals to the city. And that's maybe what you could say is a combination of kind of using social advertising to kind of also to attract new people. But maybe Alex, you probably have more experience in this, so I can imagine that you have a more detailed answer.
Yeah, balance, of course, because let's face it, most companies around the world have some kind of paid and social advertising program. So it's always a balancing act, and the way kind of I've seen a bunch of the times this being done is it comes down to your ability to track the contribution it's making and the value it's creating. So both social ads and advocacy have the ability to, first of all, you can look at that detail really granular in Google Analytics or in your marketing automation tool, whether that's HubSpot, Marketo, or wherever, or you can push it out into something like a BI tool or a data warehouse where you can slice and dice it even more. At the end of the day, you have to look at how much bang for your buck you're getting from each channel. And from experience, I can say that especially when you're getting started with something, you can't really go 100% paid ads or 100% employee advocacy because diminishing returns are a thing. So especially in the beginning, experimenting with that kind of budget allocation, trying out new channels, new employee segments for your advocacy program, new target audiences for your paid ads, and then figuring out what's creating the most bang for your buck. That's kind of how we've helped our clients balance that allocation.
Thank you. There's also a question in the chat that I think, Alex, you can answer.
Mm-hmm.
How to approach targeting with employee advocacy? It's a question from Kate.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably I'm wondering if this is a question related to targeting an audience on social, or if it's targeting employees internally. Targeting employees internally is pretty easy with a tool like Smart, given that you can tag each piece of content, make sure that it's relevant for the person that's seeing it. So say if I'm working in biochemicals, it's much more likely that I'll be interested in sharing something related to biochemicals or open positions around biochemicals with my networks than something that wasn't related. And on that point, how to reach your target segment. That's what I figured it was. That's also kind of building that same line of thinking. So when I can target my people internally correctly, so I am able to segment my content and give it to the right person, the relevant person, when they share that with their net. So think about the case of a pharmaceuticals company. If you have some kind of campaign going on related to some new pharmaceuticals, very likely if you're able to target that content to people that work in a relevant part of the business, those people probably went to school with other people that started work around that same line or got employed in that same area. So now if you can get your people internally that are interested in that to share it with their networks, most likely their networks are the correct target segment. So it all starts with targeting your people internally really well. And then that ensures that you can kind of reach the correct target segment on social.
Yeah, and when it comes to tracking, it's maybe, let's also not forget, it's not just about showing results. I think it's also really about kind of what you now are tracking things, you see results, not now what, like what can you do with that information, right? So the performance of your campaign is important, but if you can improve things, if you can do something with the data, I think is even more important.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I think we are up for time on the first round. I'm not going to announce winners. I don't think I'm equipped for that. So
you missed the bell.
Yeah. We were thinking about making a championship belt. But.
Yes. Thank you for the first round. Let's move on to the second one. So round 2. And this will start with Alex. So Alex, prepare to fight for it. How does employee advocacy work for lead generation and demand generation? That's like what most of us in marketing aim for to start.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I won't beat around the bush. I mean, of course, when we're talking about lead generation, paid ads and social ads have been around for a long time. They're, the most well-known, and you can kind of you can get really granular with your targeting, with your retargeting, with your really slicing the data to understand how to reach a very nuanced segment. So you can target those ads so well that's creating a like for lead generation there, of course, great. With advocacy, I just spoke about targeting your people internally first, and that leads to reaching the correct target segment externally. But of course, not everybody in that segment is going to be relevant to that piece of content. So I'd say that when we think about pure lead generation, social ads definitely are a worthy opponent. But employee advocacy does kind of provide a really powerful, usually untapped channel, because in most cases, employees aren't necessarily sharing company-related content. And it's not because they don't want to. Maybe it's because they feel like they don't have time. Like, I know as somebody who likes to post regularly on LinkedIn, and social in general, coming up with a good quality piece of something to share, to post about, it's time consuming, and it's not always easy. So it might not be that your employees don't want to do it. Either they don't have the time to do it, or in the worst case, they might not know what they're allowed to say. A lot of the times, some things might be confidential, and people have gotten into trouble, because, like, just think about Elon Musk sharing about thinking about taking Tesla private, and then instantly they had to ban trading on Tesla stock. So sometimes employees can have this kind of apprehension. And that's where employee advocacy comes into play, because if that channel isn't yet being tapped into, advocacy gives you a great way to give employees, first of all, a really simple way of sharing some high quality content with their networks that not only benefits the business, it also benefits themselves. And then if you're not utilizing that channel yet, at the beginning, lead generation results through that channel will skyrocket, because they're de facto going from 0 to anything. So it's infinite. So yeah, basically, from a lead generation standpoint, I do think that advocacy does provide a worthy opponent to paid ads. And if you look no further than the fact that 92% of people, there's research that states that 92% of people tend to trust recommendations from their friends over company branded accounts or any other kind of form of advertising. So when you can get your people to talk about your brand, your products, whatever's your kind of core values, it's much more likely to come across as authentic.
Thank you. It's actually a very good point that if you haven't like started using one social media channel for a company, then yes, employees are the best way to start there and just to tap this new opportunity.
Yeah.
So, Mark, what about you?
Yeah.
What would you say? How do social ads work for lead generation?
Yeah, and I have to say, like, even also Claire said it in the chat. Like, I think this is a really good point. You also mentioned trust. I think, like, or at least authenticity. I think that is actually becoming more and more important. Like, we had GDPR. We had now also there are more things happening in the world. I think why this is more and more important, and trusting people is important. But I think a lot of brands also really need to focus on creating trust even in social ads, and that can absolutely be done. So I think this is important. But I think still for most brands, social advertising is their most important lead gen channel, especially for new revenue, because whatever it is that you kind of want to achieve, if it's ad downloads, views, or registrations, I think this is a very scalable way to generate revenue from an audience that probably you wouldn't really generate revenue from without using social advertising. You can even use it retargeting. It can also be super targeted. So we have there's a food delivery company that is using super targeted ads based on your location and the restaurants located around you. So it is also super advanced, I think, when it comes to options for lead generation or revenue generation. And I think that's why it's so popular, and because it works well. But I also think it depends on the platform. I could talk about this for hours, but if you, for example, there are different social platforms, but like one that I love a lot is Pinterest, because it's a lot different, I think, from all of the other platforms. If you think about lead gen, right? Because on Pinterest, a lot of people search in a different way. So where on most platforms you would probably either search or at least be connected into a very specific product. Yeah, I think on Pinterest it's much more generic. So instead of maybe a branded red dress, you might search for red dress or even beautiful dress, and then like dresses come up, and there's, as a brand, you kind of have an opportunity to be part of that. So there are, and this is just one simple example, but there are so many different examples for each and every social platform. And I think it's very advanced. I think there are still so many different options. So yeah, I think that's why social advertising for lead gen is still super, super important.
Well, yeah, no doubt. It's like sometimes even like I've been working with social ads for a long time, but even I sometimes get like fascinated by how precise the targeting can be there. It's like it can be really overwhelming. We have a question for you, Alex, from Ed. And thank you, Ed, for elaborating a bit more now. It's easier for me to understand what the question is about. So Ed was asking, is the employees' times calculated in Smart? So the time they spend on the platform, is it calculated in Smart as like part of the investment?
That's actually a great question, and typically that hasn't been part of the equation. But that's a good point. Of course, being able to having an employee spend time on a platform does, maybe some people might see as it's taking away from whatever they're supposed to be doing at any given moment. But with Smart, what we try to do is we make it just really, really easy for the employees. You can, of course, go in if you have a little more time. You can go in and take a more thorough look and read stuff and watch videos. But if you just want something quick, we have like these on your mobile phone. You'll have like quick widgets, which are like the most popular posts or posts you may have missed, or the posts that performed best in your colleagues' networks. So I can literally go there, pick the first one, and we even have a feature called Smart Share, which just you click a button and it will automatically schedule that post to go out in your network in the optimal time that the platform has calculated for you, given on historical performance of your shares. So we just really try to make it very, very quick and easy for employees to engage in employee advocacy, to kind of set that low barrier so that you don't have to spend a lot of time curating that content yourself. Because a lot of the times employees, especially if you don't give them the tools to do this, perform this seamlessly, they might spend more time in actually just natively writing a longer post themselves on social media. And I hope that answers your question. And Anita, you're back.
Yes. Sorry, there was a small.
Was that Rope?
Yes, that was our CEO. He needed to take something from the meeting. Sorry about that.
Cameo by the CEO.
Yeah, he wanted to say hello. Yes. Thank you very much for your answers. Mark, I know it's a very complicated question, but that's something I've been wondering, like personally. Is it like, if it's like at all possible to generalize, what social media channel has shown the best results in generating B2B leads? I know it's a very, very difficult question.
I want to know this. Asking for a friend.
Yeah, I think for us, like B2B is already quite specific. Like in general, like social advertising in general, I think Facebook, Instagram are still super popular. B2B, I think everyone immediately thinks about LinkedIn as a platform. And I have to say, I think it's a pretty solid advertising platform. I think most of us have probably worked with it. It's easy, super easy. But I think the one thing that comes to my mind is that I mean, what I've seen quite a few times, and what most people forget is maybe because it's so obvious to use LinkedIn for B2B, is they kind of forget about the other channels or the other platforms. It's quite funny, I think. I would really recommend to test stuff here. I mean, we had in the beginning of the year, we had our like big event at Smartly Sofa Summit, and we were also very focused on LinkedIn. And then for some reason we thought, why not test a little bit of Facebook as well? And then actually Facebook performed like 10 times better than LinkedIn. We were very focused on registration, so it's literally just cost per registration that we looked at, and of course the quality of the registrations. So there's this, I don't know, there's this thinking, I think that like B2B marketing and a platform that instantly comes up as LinkedIn, but I would say don't, maybe test a little bit. It might be totally interesting to look at other platforms as well for B2B marketing. So yeah, Pinterest for B2B, I don't know, but yeah, why not try it? I mean, that's what I always say. Like, just test it. I mean, it doesn't really harm. You can just run a small test, and if it works well, increase it a little bit. So.
Yeah, I've always said the same thing, kind of in relation to advocacy, that so often in the advocacy world as well, people kind of intuitively gravitate towards LinkedIn, and not to knock on LinkedIn, it's a great platform, but like you should not sleep on those other platforms. Like what Facebook has like 2 billion monthly active users. I think LinkedIn is less. I don't know what the figures are currently, but I know LinkedIn is significantly less, like 4 times less or something. So when you think about scale and reach, yeah, don't sleep on those other channels.
Okay, thank you very much, both, and thank you for answering the question from my friend, Mark. It's really helpful. So let's move on to round number 3. And the third question is like every marketer's nightmare, I think, the lead attribution. So Mark, maybe you can start here. How do you approach lead attribution in social ads?
I'm not sure if it's a nightmare, but I can relate to that, to be honest. But I think in most cases, it's actually quite easy to track lead attribution, and it's not just social advertising. I think in general, like anything in the digital world is still pretty easy to track. If not like in the tool itself, there's always like maybe ETM code or whatever you kind of want to use to track things. So I'm almost gonna say it's easy, but I think maybe the most difficult part is maybe the human side of it, and that's not something that we should easily forget. So I think it happens a lot. I think it happens a lot that there's no clear attribution model inside of a company or a team, or you still look at one lead source, for example. And in a world where if it's B2B or B2C, I think people are all over the place and connecting with you through so many different channels. it's not so much about the technology behind it. I think it's much more about what kind of model are you going to use, or maybe model is not the right word. Maybe it's also just an agreement that you have with your team and as a company. Because most of these, I think the big reason why this is such a headache for a lot of marketers is really that human side. It's not so much we cannot measure it. They don't know either what to measure or how to specifically measure it, because they want to contribute maybe multiple channels or multiple touches. And that's really, I think to me, that's really the hard part, and not so much the technology part. So it's almost more, I would almost say it's simple. It's just the human side that's extremely difficult, that is really creating all of these headaches.
That's a very interesting take on that. I think there's always like also this small war between sales and marketing, like who brought in the lead, which is also like a big aspect of a human side of lead attribution. But Alex, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, pretty similar line. I mean, we can sit here and talk about the attribution model you're using, like is it first touch, last touch, multi-touch? Is it some kind of hybrid? There's a bunch of ways to do it. At the end of the day, like the issue arises when you have so much data, like because we can track so many things these days. So when you have this plethora of information, being able to like make sense of it and figure out what's the useful bit for you to know, that's the tricky thing. But when we think about lead attribution in a advocacy context, some very standard rules apply, like seeing that it came in through which channel did it come in through? Did it come through social media, so like a LinkedIn, Facebook? Did it maybe come through a WhatsApp message or a WeChat message, something like that? Figuring out which channels are working the best. But with attribution, like with employee advocacy, you can do a lot of other things related to kind of lead attribution, like which type of content brought the lead. So was it an image? Was it a video? Was it an article? Was it a native microblog or something like that? And you can get even more granular, and kind of maybe my favorite. And we were talking about the human side of things. One of my favorite things with advocacy, and especially like attributing certain leads through advocacy, is that with employee advocacy, you can go as deep as to figure out like which employee is driving a lead, or which employee is driving a registration. Like for example, for this session, we used our own advocacy solution and had smart employees sharing information about the creatives and materials we had around the session, and we can tell that which employees were kind of driving the most traffic. So with that, when you can kind of go that deep, you can figure out like which employee is creating the most pipeline, which employee is creating the most opportunities, which employee is creating the most meetings. And that allows you to do kind of some cool things. Like, I know we talk a lot about gamification. My favorite example of gamification, there's many forms of gamification. You can have like a point system on the platform, or you can give, swag, or something like that for top performers. My favorite example was we had a customer who said that the top SMARPer for each quarter gets priority parking the next quarter, so they get to park closest to the office door. Now it's coronavirus right now. Maybe that's not worth much in this context, but back then it was worth a lot, and especially if you have a large parking place and it's hot outside or raining outside. It's actually like making your contributions tangible. So that's the thing that I really like about advocacy attribution, is you can get very human with it as well.
I like that, the human side of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And as Alex said, we had like a cool internal battle here for driving for this webinar, marketing ROI battle. So we have also internal competition. But okay, let's move on to the next question. Thank you. So round 4 is, and Alex, you're going to be the first one to answer here. So how does employee advocacy work for talent acquisition?
Oh, that's my favorite. talent acquisition, of course, is one of the best use cases for employee advocacy. I mean, we talked a lot about how it can work for your lead generation. There's a bunch of different things that advocacy can do for you, but talent acquisition especially is something where advocacy can help a great deal. And it, in my personal opinion, is the best kind of form of talent acquisition, is to do it through employee advocacy. And I go back to something I said earlier, which is people trust people. It's the same whether you're talking about a product or you're talking about the company you work for and what it's like to actually work at that company. So there's no better way to communicate stuff about your company than through employee advocacy. And like, I don't mean just necessarily sharing open job positions. And that's like, by the way, like when we think about talent acquisition, that's also a lot of the times where we kind of stop it. We're like, okay, we're going to put our open position on social media or on the advocacy platform and have employees share it. And that's kind of the talent acquisition effort. And that is, of course, a core part of it. But it goes much deeper than that. Whenever your employees are sharing anything, like a press release, maybe like the creatives we did for this session, even though that was to kind of promote a live session we were doing, those creatives speak to what kind of company we are, what it's like to work at SMARP. So now somebody that saw that, you know, next time we're hiring for someone in marketing, they're going to remember, oh, they had those cool creatives. You know, that must be a cool brand to work with. So it like goes much deeper than just sharing those open job positions. And when you're able to use advocacy in a talent acquisition context like this, it goes way beyond like just getting employees through the door, like actually hiring them. It also goes to, you know, satisfaction. It goes to, you know, attracting the right talent to even apply. It goes all the way to retention. So, you know, when employees know the brand that they're going to start working for, there are no like unfortunate mismatches in expectations when they actually join the company. So they're much more likely to have a good experience working with that brand. So talent acquisition is, of course, a great employee advocacy use case. And I could talk about that for days, for sure.
Yeah, but that's a very good point, that like everything your company puts out is like another brick in your employer branding. So it's not just about talent acquisition, it's just about how people see you as a company.
Yeah.
Mark, what about you? What would you say about how social ads work?
I think it's like the opposite from the lead generation question. So of course, I have to say there's probably nothing better than employee advocacy when it comes to talent acquisition. I mean, think about it, what's better than hearing things directly from actual employees? I mean, there's nothing better than that. So at this round, obviously goes to you already. But I do think that there's a healthy mix that you can add. So I think social advertising can really help also to maybe help with the reach, maybe reaching more people, right? Maybe people that you wouldn't have reached without promoting it, right? So and maybe more of a new audience. And I also kind of like what you said about it's not just about the open like roles that you have right now. I know like at Smartly we have like a cultural handbook, which is a little bit famous, and we love that. Like we really shared it openly, and I think you know by promoting that a little bit here and there, and also like what we stand for as a company, I think that is also attracting talent. So it's and maybe also. Not just roles in specific roles, but also maybe tech roles or marketing roles, or like in that sense, you can also kind of promote things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a specific job that you're promoting. And then you could maybe use social advertising a little bit more and in a better way. So I would say like if you mix it, you could actually end up with a really nice result too. So yeah.
But I agree that like I think if you want to open up a completely new market in a new country, then like most likely just advocacy won't cut it. Like you need to new people, and like if your connections are mostly in Finland, then like, you need. It's a way
also for people to kind of recognize your brand, and the more they see your brand is also helping, of course, to attract talent. And so in a way, even your ads, even if it has nothing to do with maybe hiring or whatsoever, then it could still very much help, I think, with actually attracting new talent. So yeah, kind of empowers both ways.
Alex, do you have some like a particular example where advocacy like worked particularly well for? Like, is there some customer where you felt like talent acquisition, was great for them?
Yeah, it's a very similar question that Jim just asked as well. Yeah, I think something that comes to mind immediately is brands or companies that work in industries where they have really like specialized workforce. I already used the example of kind of like the pharma kind of chemicals industry. So maybe I'll keep on that. So imagine you have an open position. You're looking for a biochemicals engineer, and you have a bunch of biochemicals engineers in your company. Now, there's only a finite number of people in the world that can fill that kind of role, and finding those people can be kind of tricky. Usually you're going to have to maybe even work with a headhunter to fill even kind of a non-senior role in that type of role. But if you have biochemical engineers in your company already, again, they probably already went to school with other people that became biochemical engineers. They're probably connected with them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, a variety of channels. So when you can get them to promote that position, it's much more likely that you're going to find a relevant person. And I've heard that story with some of our pharma clients. There's a great case study, like actual video case study we did with Duravermeer, which is a construction company in the Netherlands, and where they talked about how using advocacy they're able to increase the rate on hiring, hard to fill positions, what they call hard to fill positions. So positions that require really specialized skill set. So that is definitely, that immediately comes to mind.
Thank you. Mark, do you I don't know if you are allowed to talk about your customers, but are there some of your customers that are like using Smartly a lot for talent acquisition or like a particular industry that has been benefiting a lot from social ads for talent acquisition?
To be honest, I don't know. It's not super common, I think, but the example that I shared earlier around like cities sharing it, I think is a very beautiful example on how you could kind of use social advertising to attract talent. And actually, while we were discussing, I actually looked up the website. It's helsinkihomedelivered.com. Just if you have some time, check it out. It's super cool, and we collaborated with them. But it's I think a super nice example on how you could how a city is attracting new talent. So yeah, check it out.
Okay, thank you both very much, and thank you, Jim, for your question in the chat. We had the same mind there. I asked exactly the same question. Okay, now I guess we can count that advocacy kind of won this question, but the social ads for sure won the one. So in this sense, I can already like announce the winners a little bit. But let's go to the last one. Round number 5. How do you choose how much budget to allocate to social ads and employee advocacy? So how do you balance those two? Mark, maybe you could start here.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the opening of our talk today. I think it all comes down to ROI again, the targets that you set, of course. But I think in general there probably aren't many companies that are successful by spending all of their budget on social advertising. On the other hand, there are probably also not many companies that are successful by spending all of their budget on employee advocacy. So, and let's not forget about all the other channels that we have. There's obviously a lot more, but I think it's really about finding the right balance, testing what works best and what delivers the right ROI for you. So, I would say it's in many things, but also in this case, I think it's really about finding the right balance between both of these channels and all of the other channels that are out there.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Claire, for the comment. So nice to hear that Justify and Smart worked for you, even though it was hard. It's really nice to get comments like this. Alex, what did you say?
Yeah, I say, Claire, I want to see that deck. Interested to hear the meetings that went down. Yeah, so like Mark said, it comes down to ROI. It comes down to the ability for any initiative to generate value for the business, whether that's revenue. For a lot of companies, it is revenue, or some kind of monetary saving or whatever. Basically, a balance sheet figure. So being able to connect that platform, that program, and that initiative to the bottom line, it's always going to come down to ROI. And I can kind of back what Mark just said, which is, in any kind of initiative, it's usually bad to have all of your eggs in one basket. So put 100% of your budget into any given initiative. It's always a mix, just because, even something that I said earlier, like the concept of diminishing returns. If you invest too heavily down one lane, the returns at some point are going to start getting a little worse. Like, you're going to get less bang for your buck. Whereas then when you introduce a new channel, especially in the beginning, it's going to skyrocket. And then when you can kind of level those out and find that optimal, it's really about figuring out, how much money you're spending to get, how many dollars you're spending to get $1 in. And when you can level that out and find the optimal balance between all your channels, it's not just social ads and advocacy. That's when you're golden, basically.
So it's all about finding the right balance.
And I even like, one thing I suggest, and what I like, is to have kind of some, especially in marketing, because marketing changes really quick. The channels that work, the way SEO works, the way anything kind of works in the marketing world can change on a dime. Google can decide that they're going to change the algorithm for SEO. Well, now your organic ranking is terrible. LinkedIn is going to change the way they target ads. Now you have to rework your ad campaigns. It can change so quick. So what I always like to advise is that you have something set aside that you can, basically try something new. Like, have some budget stashed away that, you can try a new initiative. If you're not running an advocacy program, you can put some into that. If you're not doing, referral or guest blogging, for example, you can put some money into that. If you're not spending money on social ads, although I think that most people probably are spending something on social ads, you have, money to put into that. So I just advise to kind of be a little be open when it comes to that, because you're always in marketing. Things are so easily trackable. We talked about that. Things are so easily trackable that you're going to be able to level out the ROI contribution pretty quick, or the revenue contribution.
Yeah, talking about the budget, we have a question from Sam here. What's the minimum budget a company needs to get value from employee advocacy or social ads? Like, he's asking, for example, if you're an early stage company, what would be the minimum budget to allocate to both? What do you think?
That's a tough question. It depends. It's case by case. We've worked with early stage companies, but traditionally we see that the most value of SMARP comes from, like, when you're a more established company with especially the more. Essentially, it comes down to the fact that the more employees you have, the more likely you're going to get value out of a product like SMARP. So I'd say, especially from an entry level, and if you're thinking about early stage, it's most likely social ads that are going to provide a larger benefit. Whereas then when you mature, employee advocacy becomes more and more valuable. I don't know, Mark, if you have a better answer to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, on the social ad side, it's a myth that you need a lot of budget to run anything. I mean, I actually think, even with a super small budget, you can run your ads. It really comes down to maybe more the creative part of it. So, and not so much the technology behind it or the budget that you're using. I think if you have a super creative campaign that really makes a lot of sense, that's more important, I think, than having a really big budget behind it. And of course, that's going to help, right? But if you're talking about starting, I think if you have a good idea and you have really nice creatives and things like that, then even a small budget can really, you can get to your goals. So, I think you can start small with social advertising too. That's totally possible.
Yeah. Well, one thing I also wanted to bring up, if we're like on the topic of budget allocation, is, and of course, especially on the advocacy side, is a lot of the times we tend to think about advocacy as a pure marketing initiative, and in a lot of the time, and of course, that's the easiest place to go. You can really easily, for example, see how much value advocacy is creating from a cost per click perspective, for example. So you can allocate some marketing budget to that, but don't hesitate to kind of get HR, the communications department, other, even sales involved in that, because we noticed that the most successful programs are when kind of it's a multi-department initiative. And if you think about it, HR is going to benefit from an employer branding and a talent attraction standpoint. Marketing is going to, of course, benefit from a lead generation standpoint. Communications is going to, like internal comms, is going to benefit from the fact that now your employees are kind of being influenced by that content. They're getting more aligned. They know what's going on with the company and the industry. So there's a bunch of different departments that can benefit from it. So don't look at it as a purely, having to take 100% of it from a marketing budget. There's other ways that most of our clients kind of slice that budget.
Yes, thank you very much. There's also another question from Jim on communicating proving the ROI of social ads and employee advocacy to your management. If you guys can share some tips on how to do it, what's the best way to educate your CRO or CMO and get them on board with investing in advocacy and advertisement? Maybe Mark, you could start.
I think it's related actually to the previous question that he asked around employee advocacy as a platform, if I'm not mistaken, I think. But if it comes down to social advertising, it's again, you can start small. So it's also super easy to show results. So that's, if that's the thing that you're really want to achieve, I think if you show results, that's always gonna get you an approval or increasing the budget on something. So I think for social advertising, this is a very easy thing to solve, and easier today than it was 10 years ago, because we talked about leadership and presenting results to leadership earlier, but I think when it comes to social advertising 10 years ago, a lot of those leadership people didn't really understand social advertising. So it was actually maybe enough to show high-level results, right? And money goes into it and revenue comes out of it, and that was kind of enough. Today it's a lot more about showing real details and real results, and a lot more into the details. So but that's easy to do, I think, today. So but I think this question is maybe more related to employee advocacy and how you actually do that.
Yeah, for that, I think Claire would be the best to respond, given that she did.
Share your presentation.
But yeah, it of course, and we're coming full circle, because in the beginning we were talking about proving ROI. So being able to prove your contribution to the bottom line of the company, that's how you're going to, because that's what, especially when we go to senior management and the C-suite, that's what they're going to be interested in. Like, what are the overall metrics that are important to you as a company? Is that revenue? Is that the amount of people we can hire? Is that, some kind of employee engagement metric? And I think that's the key, because for each of and with advocacy, it's so interesting because, again, you can get multiple departments involved, and all of those departments will have their own kind of main thing that they're interested in. For marketing, it's going to be something like pipeline generation or contribution to revenue. For sales, it's going to be outbound sales and kind of money or like revenue created in general. For HR, it could be, again, like people you've hired, everybody's going to have their own number, their own thing that they're interested in. It almost always will be a number. It won't always be a number, but it almost always will be a number. So when you can figure out what the important thing is for your key senior stakeholder or stakeholders, and you can educate them on how advocacy can move that number, that's when you can, that's how you educate and how you get senior management on board.
Okay, thank you both very much. I think Claire is happy to help. Yeah, we're still waiting for you to join the stage. But thank you both very much for this battle. I don't think we can choose winners here. As you said, it's all about finding the balance and finding what works for your particular company, and testing. That's something that came up a lot today, and I think that's like something all of us as marketers should always keep doing, testing. So let's maybe move on to the closing statements. And I want to thank you both for participating. Mark, maybe you could share with us some last words of wisdom.
Yeah, totally. Well, I haven't prepared anything, but I think, well, I like the testing part. So every business is different. I would say try new things. I think that's really important, especially because it's not very common anymore. Like, have this environment where you can try new things, experiment, find out what works for you, find out what works for your brand, then do it well, have fun while doing it. And I think that will really drive the best results for you. So yeah, that's what I would say is my advice, if I can give advice.
Thank you, Mark. And I also just wanted to say that I have now posted a call to action to join our next webinar. It's called the Great Comms Debate, and it's a big success within communications community. So if you have colleagues working in communications, please do share it with them. We'll have 3 experts from communications industry sharing their views on the hottest trends nowadays in communications. So if you click this button, you won't lose us. You open a new tab, so you'll still hear the closing statements from Alex. His last words of wisdom. So Alex, please share your wisdom with us.
My final words. Any last words? I think feels kind of sinister. Yeah, same sentiment. Keep testing. Be open to trying new things, new channels, new initiatives. Maybe have some budget aside to start something like an advocacy program and test out how it works for you. That's what I would say to people kind of on the cusp, kind of thinking about investing in something like this. The other thing for those people, of course, again, don't think of it as a pure one department play. There's so many elements or so many departments of the business that can benefit from advocacy. For those of you who are already running an advocacy program, again, keep doing what you're doing. If employees, just when you want to get employees engaged with your program even more, I always notice that the easiest thing to do is to just ask them and tell them that this is what we'd like you to do, and this is what's in it for you. Because with advocacy, we always get so focused on what's in it for the business, like how many leads can we create, how much revenue can we generate, but there are significant benefits for the employees as well, like growing their networks, becoming a thought leader, being just more fluent on social media in general, which is really important in this day and age. So just be sure to educate your users around that as well. And do reach out to us on LinkedIn and let us know who won. I want to know who won, because Anita won't tell us.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a bit biased, so I can't say. But I would be happy to hear what the audience thought. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to our amazing speakers. And have a good evening or morning, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.